I want to play another quick soundbite here because it talks a little bit about some of the cliches.
5 years old, I'm standing on the balcony, 7th floor, and I'm calculating. When I go to my grandmother and I ask her, what happens when people die? She says nothing, everything goes black. So being practical, I went to my bedroom, lied on my bed, closed my eyes, and 10 minutes later I started to cry because I felt myself in darkness. I cried because I lost the option of not existing because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to not exist anymore. Now things got better. By the age of 13, I was praying and I had an amazing experience where my chest just opened and I felt this love for the whole world. It's like a state of bliss. And it lasted for about 2 months. Literally, I felt love for everything around me, rocks, whatever. It was strange. But then something weird happened. It's like a light bulb that just got an extra bit of light and it popped. And I fell in a hole inside myself. And that's the beginning of depression. By the time I was 18, I'm going to try to not commit suicide because friends and family would hurt. So I'm going to try to work on myself as much as I can. And if I can't, then I'll leave this place. There's a lot of misconceptions about suicide and depression. And they make things much worse. For example, one of the things that I had to deal with is this attitude of, why don't you snap out of it? That's like looking at a homeless person and saying, why don't you get rich?
Again, the cliches are not helpful, and I'm sure all of you would attest to the fact that the Bible verses are great, but when they come at you by way of cliche, or it's just not helpful to the struggle that you're going through. One more thing, and then we need to get to Diane, but Caitlin's friends came over, and they did dumb things with you, they did meaningful things with you, and they were there for you, and they said, we're here because we love Caitlin, but they were expressing their love for Caitlin by loving you. Now, help me understand here. Is this kind of typical? Has happened to you, Jim?
The story that I told about the 4 couples that came back to sit by me, they came to support me.
It was just so amazing to me because I think when there is a loss, and it can be like we said, a loss of anything, anybody, I mean, and there's a void there. And for both of us, actually, I think we were ministering to each other. I will never replace Caitlin for them, or will they replace Caitlin for me, but we could love on each other, whether it be by baking cookies together, just sitting in the presence and talking about her or seeing things about her or just being together was amazing that these 20-year-olds did, and Lord bless them.
We're going to doing that. We'll come back to you, but I want to go to Diane because, Diane, I think you had a similar experience. Your son, Jonathan?
Correct.
You were going to find out that some of his friends came around you, too. Is that right?
Yes. John was a part of a youth group called Youth Alive, and he and his brother played in the praise and worship. And when John died on Monday night, and we called our close friends that were in the youth group with him, they got the word out. And we had people coming from Wisconsin, and they just drove to be with us. So that was our church. The church we attended was not there at the time.
Yes.
But all the youth and all these pastors and our neighbors and friends, they surrounded us for the first 2 or 3 days up to the funeral.
Well, let me tell you what I learned about John in the film. Again, folks, the film is, what is the title of the film, Jim?
Helping Suicide Survivors.
Okay, Helping Suicide Survivors. Okay, here's what I learned about John. He was a music major at Crown College, correct, and that's a suburb of Minneapolis, for those of you who aren't in this area. He loved the Lord. He loved people. You said he couldn't see good in himself. I want to ask you about that. Apparently, he observed, and there was a gun in a locked box in your home, and somehow he got a hold of the combination. Apparently he looked over the shoulder as your husband was playing with the combination.
Correct. My husband was a police officer, and he kept his off-duty gun in a lockbox. But this happened earlier, I think when John was around 18, and we hadn't found out about this until after he died. One of his close friends told us the story that John did watch his dad occasionally and got the combination, and one night attempted to shoot himself with the gun, but the gun misfired. And there were other attempts that John did for suicide, and God spared his life. And so when he did actually succeed in suicide, it was really hard questioning God why he didn't again spare his life.
Dr. Bachman, again, the church, and I know because suicide's in my family, I've lost family members to it, and the church will sometimes kind of make you feel guilty if you're a Christian and you're depressed. How do we overcome that? How do we say to people, it's okay to be depressed, God's not going to condemn you to hell, but how do we get them well?
You know, there doesn't seem to be the shame associated when someone has a physical illness.
Exactly.
But when someone has a mental illness, there is a great deal of shame involved. And I think we need to remember that it's actually condemnation that's associated with many people and families. And we should understand that condemnation comes from the enemy. Conviction comes from God, and conviction is quick and right to the point and corrects us. But condemnation has layers of darkness for months and years. And part of the tragedy of someone's family members who are working through the loved one is that they have unanswered questions for life. It is a part of it. But to get to your question about the church and the difficulty. And I do think there's a lot of well-meaning people that want to say something. And if I can just be blunt, often they should just shut up.
Okay.
They should listen. They should stand next to them. They should be present.
I heard you say in the film that they need to be saying in so many words, be it audible, visible, whatever, I'm here, I care, and offer no quick fixes.
Yes.
And again, and I think we're a society of quick fixes.
Yeah.
I think being there is harder today. I tell you, I feel we're a generation, I feel we're a 2 Timothy 3 generation. In the last days, men will be lovers of self, money, etc., etc. Goes on to talk about a lot of selfish characteristics. And I find most of society drowning in the lake of me, myself, and I. So to get ourselves out of me, myself, I, and into the life of Diane and the others here may not be as easy as you and I would like to think it is.
Absolutely. The culture, lest we forget what we're living in today, is not only a narcissistic type of culture, but it's also a culture that unfortunately does not respect life. And I think that there has been such a deterioration of the culture, Jan, and that is a sign of the end times, obviously, that life is not protected. There's not a sense that life has that much value. Mm-hmm. And we go by this psychological approach of how do I feel makes the difference of how I can make a decision to end my life or not. That has grave consequences to what we're seeing the suicide rate increase.